Today on MuscleCar, Altered Ego's mock-up motor drops in. The mod motor meets the dyno. And all rise, the honorable GTO judge is here.
Hey guys, welcome to MuscleCar. Today we're going to be taking a break from our other cars and getting back on our 64 Comet drag car, Project Altered Ego. Now, it doesn't matter how much tin you chop up or how many bars you put in, it doesn't mean anything without a drivetrain, and that's what today's show is all about. This car will be an AFX dragster, so when we blew it apart, we didn't have to worry about reusing every piece. We chopped it up, moved the rear end up 16 inches, widened the tubs, modified the frame rails, and got to work on the roll cage. Now, we got something cool and different to fill in the engine compartment in this thing. We'll get to that later. One thing I can tell you, it's going to take up a lot more space than this Comet here has to offer. And that means more of this factory tin is going to have to find its way into the scrap heap. Some of you guys might be crying watching me chop up these virgin shock towers, but it's a necessary evil because we need to save the fender mounting surfaces to get the sheet metal hung back in place. Back in the 60s, when these cars were getting cut to pieces and raced, guys would hack out the shock towers, leaving the edges, and head to the strip. But we're not that hack, so we're going to drill out the spot welds and get rid of the leftovers. After warming up the grinder and smoothing off the frame rails, you'll be as smooth as eggs. It's time to see how much of this newfound underhood real estate the motor is going to take up. Plus, we need to get our motor mounts fabbed up and get our headers fabbed up, and we need to see if we're going to have to chop up our firewall. Now, the real engine that's going to go in this is going to be a highly modified Cobra motor, but for now we're using a mock-up engine just because it's lighter and a lot easier to handle. Plus, we don't have to worry about banging up the real one. All right, cool. How we look?
I think we'll be okay.
We may even have to lose that center cross member. The one that we worked so hard to tie into our frame.
Yeah, but we can raise it. It's no big deal.
We still got a steering column.
Ooh,
yeah,
steering
column. Well, I was thinking about that on the brake. What if we use like a street rod style that has the lever where you actually push it on the pedal and it pushes that lever in behind it, you know what I mean? And mount it crossways behind the firewall, because then we'll have tons of room for the head.
Yeah, that'll work.
On the side. And out here, since we chopped all this out, we could actually take the clutch, mount the clutch out here, outboard of the steering column. It'll be a little bit weird with the pedal over on the other side, but then we'll have room for the headers to come out the side. We'll have clearance for our steering column.
Well, since we have so many holes that need to be filled, why don't we just cut the firewall off?
You want to drop the whole firewall out? You love making work for us, don't you? Need to mock up some motor mounts on this thing, but we need to decide on height-wise where we're going to put it. The stacks are going to come up. They're not real tall stacks. They're probably 6 inches or so. Something like that. Decide on the height, how much the floor, or how tall of a hump we want in the floor, and then mock up our mounts just to kind of set it in there. If we run the master cylinder sideways behind the dash, we don't have to worry about clearance on the head, so we could basically put this thing wherever we want it.
We don't want to get it up too high because then our mount will be in the way for our steering column, yeah. Probably get the motor mounts in, get our suspension hung, and then go from there.
If we could do that and set the axle right there, that'd be just about centered on that spring. That'd set the whole engine behind the front axle. That'd be a wheel standing son of a gun.
Yeah, it would.
I think our biggest issue is going to be clearancing for the transmission. That thing's huge.
Yeah, we'll make room.
Yeah, that's right. That's why God invented plasma cutters. To avoid catching the foam mock-up motor on fire, we're covering it up with a welding blanket. It's a thick material treated with flame retardant. Since we're probably replacing the whole firewall later, I'm just getting enough of the Comet out of the way to make room for the motor and tranny. With the motor set where we want it, we can make some mounts. Brent's starting with the plates that attach to the motor. With these in place, you can make the extensions that connect it all to the frame rails. With one mount tacked in place,
That's good.
we need to make sure the engine's level. A slight tweak of the engine hoist and everything looks good, so the other side can be tacked in. One final measurement to make sure the setback is equal on both sides, and it can all be finished up. With the motor mounts in, we can get our transmission set in place and get a cross member built. Now obviously this isn't the motor that's going to stay in Altered Ego, because plastic blocks don't hold up to internal combustion very well. But we do have the real one that just showed up along with the guy who built it. So stick around, because after the break we're getting schooled on the 4.6.
Up next, a small engine that packs a big punch.
Hey, welcome back. Now, I told you guys earlier in the show that we had something special planned for the Powerplant and Altered Ego, and here it is. It started life as a Ford 4.6 liter, but it's been sleeved and bored out to a full 5 liters. It has billet racing cams, oversized valves and seats, CNC ported heads, and it's all topped off with a throttle body intake. And here's the man behind the motor, the mod god himself, Sean Hyland. How you doing, man?
Good, Rick. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So how is it that you know so much about these motors?
Well, we've been working on them a long time.
Well, about how long?
Basically, we've been working on these engines pretty much exclusively since '95. And we've developed them for, road racing, drag racing. We've been privileged to work with a lot of the people that were pioneers racing these, like John Mahovitz, first guy to drag race one of these engines in the 9s, the 8s, the 7s, and then the 6s.
And you built all those motors?
We've worked with John, we built some, and we've also developed components with him. We've also worked with some semi-factory backed race teams, people like Multimatic that ran Grand Am Cup. We were involved in the development of these engines for GT3. So a lot of opportunities around the world working with these engines for the last 12 or 13 years.
So you literally know these things inside and out.
Yeah, I sleep with them at night.
Nice. Well, I sure appreciate your help on our project here. Well, can you tell us anything about the short block?
Absolutely. This is a Ford production block we're using on this build-up. It's the best one they made, called the Texid block. Unfortunately, it was only used till '99. So for higher horsepower applications, we actually have our own casting, a full race block that we offer now. But for this one, this is good to over 1,000 horsepower the way it sits.
No kidding.
And same thing, the crankshaft, production forged steel crankshaft. We've used these crankshafts up to 1,500 horsepower, no problem.
Well, what kind of power are you getting out of your aftermarket blocks?
The aftermarket block is good to 2,500.
Holy smoke. So what head castings do you start with?
These are 0304 Cobra castings, one of the better late model castings. And then they're CNC ported with our own port design. That removes the human variability. If the head porter had a fight with his wife the night before, we don't have to worry about it. And then we fit them with our stainless valves, our valve springs, retainers, locks, and our own camshaft profile, which are ground onto billet cores.
Ah, so you actually designed the profile of the cams then?
Yeah, we've got about 8 different profiles depending on the application.
Oh, wow. So the rods and pistons, are those just straight off a shelf, or what are those?
Those are actually our design. We had to work with companies like Manley for the rods, JE for the pistons, ARP for the studs years ago when we started working on these engines, because at the time, none of these parts existed, so they're all to our specs.
Well, this doesn't look like any standard small block Ford that I've seen.
No, these engines all have 6 main bolts on them, 4 down this way and 2 side bolts on each cap. So we have to torque all of them in sequence to get everything lined up the way it needs to be. First, the main bolts in the 4 pattern, and then we have to use an inch-pound torque wrench to tighten the side bolts correctly. You know, Rick, one of the tricks with putting these engines together, we put the ARP Moly Lube on the bolt, but we tighten the bolt to torque, which is 55 foot-pounds, 3 times and loosen it off. That gets rid of any residual friction between the bolt thread and the connecting rod, so that when we torque the bolt for the final time, we get the correct amount of preload on the bolt.
Gotcha. So put it in?
You bet.
Wow. Looks like you're ready for the head gaskets. What's up with these?
This is a multi-lam gasket. It's made of all metal materials laminated together, and it's held in place with a rivet until it gets set in the engine. These type of gaskets are really durable. There's no composition material, so there's nothing to blow out. They'll stand up to nitrous, supercharged, whatever you want to throw at it.
So they're more better.
More better.
Cool. The heads are where the real power is made. Sean spent his career perfecting the engineering behind these power plants, and that's why we can expect to get such big power out of such small displacement. Once the heads are torqued to 75 foot-pounds, the timing components can go on. Now, I've built a lot of domestic V8s, but seeing what looks like 20 feet of timing chain, man, I'm glad Sean is the one putting this thing together. 4 cams means it's not only 4 times as complicated, it's also 4 times as critical to get it right. Man, you've been busy over here. Which got set up?
This is the setup for degreeing in the cams. We have the degree wheel on the front of the engine, dial indicator on the cylinder head, and we're going to degree in the cams. Degreeing the camshafts on the double overhead cam 4.6 Ford engine is super important. If you don't do it properly, you're going to flat leave 30 to 40 horsepower on the table.
That's a lot. So what's the first step?
Rotating the engine until we see 50 thou valve lift, we record the valve opening point on the degree wheel. We then do the same on the closing point and adjust the camshafts as necessary.
So how long does this usually take?
It can take up to 4 to 5 hours to do this properly.
Oh man, we don't have that kind of time.
I have both a book and a DVD on this subject in more detail.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, we'll get a link set up on our website at powerblock.tv.com so you guys can check those out. Now stick around because we're going to finish buttoning this thing up, get down to horsepower, and invade their dyno room right after the break.
Next on Flashback, a numbers matching GTO judge. Today's Flashback, a 1970 GTO judge.
Order in the court, MuscleCar fans. All rise for the Honorable GTO judge. The verdict's in, and this goat's guilty of outrageous styling and disturbing the peace. This numbers matching 1970 judge really knows how to lay down the law with its 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3 V8. This engine could produce 366 horsepower, that's 16 over the standard GTO. It features D-port heads, hydraulic camshaft, free-flowing exhaust manifolds, and a Rochester quadrajet 4-barrel carb. The Ram Air intake can be opened with a knob under the dash to suck in more air and boost power. Keeping track of all that power was easy with the hood-mounted tach. Bill Stovall isn't afraid to drop the hammer, or should I say gavel, on this judge.
It takes a few years off my life looking back younger. That's how it makes you feel.
Judges also came with a heavy-duty suspension, which included coil springs front and rear, a thicker front anti-roll bar, 4-link in the rear, and stiffer shocks. The Judge made its debut in 1969, a much different car than originally planned. The engineers at Pontiac had been working on a budget version of the GTO to compete with Plymouth's Roadrunner. It was called the ET, short for elapsed time, and had a 350 engine. But that project got nixed when Pontiac's division head John DeLorean refused to have anything smaller than a 400 in the GTO. What they ended up with was a pricier version of the GTO with a lot more flash and a little extra power. DeLorean named it the Judge, based on a skit from the hit show Laugh-In. In 1970, the Judge got a bit of a facelift. The long tricolor stripe down the side was now 2 eyebrows over each wheel. The Judge logo was moved to behind the front tire and onto the rear deck lid. Black caps on the wheel hubs were changed to red by March of 1970. Up front, the concealed headlight option was axed, and the grille got a blacked out treatment. In the rear, the huge airfoil no longer curved down at both ends, but was flat all the way across, and the exhaust was altered to 2 dual tailpipes. Now, the car didn't look this good when Bill found it almost 20 years ago.
The front fenders were basically junk.
It underwent a total rotisserie restoration, and the result was a car that won a gold award in the concourse class at the 2006 GTO Nationals in Louisville, Kentucky.
People are used to all judges being orange, but that's not true. And then when you tell somebody you got a blue judge when it has pink and orange stripes, and they really think you've gone overboard.
Only 3,797 judges were built in 1970. about $3,000 less than the previous year. Thanks to rising insurance costs, interest in muscle cars was beginning to wane, and the last Judge was produced in January of 1971. Only about 11,000 total were produced in that 3-year span, and that makes these cars highly sought after today. And it's easy to see why. Ladies and gentlemen, court's adjourned.
Coming up, Rick and Sean test the Go Power for Altered Ego.
Well, we snuck down here to Horsepower's dyno room and we commandeered the joint. We're going to do our best to twist the shaft off this thing. What do you think the odds are, Sean?
I think the dyno will probably survive.
All right, this little mod motor did good. 491 horsepower at 6,800 RPMs, 415 foot-pounds of torque at 5,900.
It's about what we expected.
It's a nice little motor.
Thank you.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Looks like Altered Ego's going to have plenty of power to hang the front wheels.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. I really appreciate it. Hey, thank you for coming down and helping us out with the project.
My pleasure, Rick.
Hey, Sean Hyland Motorsports, if you want the best of the best to build an engine, look him up. He's also on our website on powerblocktv.com. While you guys were in there thrashing on the dyno there, I was out thrashing on the panel, wherever it is. There it is. Just a little thank you from me to you.
Wow, thank you very much.
I appreciate it,
That's
man.
sweet.
I really do. I really do. Thanks again. Well, hey, I got to get back down to MuscleCar and get back to work before we can hit the track. But we're out of time for this week, so for now, we're out of here. So let's go get a beer, man.
Okay.